for our special fireside chat, Reid and his guests will be doing a deep dive on how AI is used to help understand animal communication and discussing ways this technology will impact the way we all communicate in the upcoming years. Please join me in welcoming our special guest for the evening. He is the co-founder and president of Earth Species Project, an international nonprofit dedicated to using AI to decode animal communication and transforming how human beings relate to the rest of nature. Over the past 2 years, ESP's research team has delivered a number of firsts in the field of animal communication. These include the development of the first ever benchmarks and foundation models, the fundamental building blocks for the use of AI in this field. Please join me in welcoming Aza Raskin. Hey, Aza.
Oh, thanks so much, Jardine. Nice to see you, and nice to see you, Reid.
Well, I think I'm going to drop off to let you two get into it, but it's such an honor to meet you, Aza, and I love the work that you guys are doing.
Jardine, we can't wait to see you a little later.
All right, I'll let you guys go.
So, Aza, we've known each other a long time. Mozilla. And I think I was one of the earliest people you talked to about this. But so tell us about the Earth Species Project. Who, what is it? How did your interest in animal communication begin?
Yeah. Well, so we're a nonprofit. We're a little over 15 people now. We're a small group, but we work with like 40 plus universities and biologists, sort of network of a network style. And our goal is to translate animal communication, or if I'm even more bold, translate animal language. Can we learn how to listen to whales and orangutans, tool-using crows? And it turns out whales have been passing down culture for like 34 million years vocally. Human beings have been doing it for 100,000, 300,000? So this is a culture that has lasted longer, 85 times longer than our entire species. How I got interested was... Actually, randomly, I was listening to a NPR piece as I drove down 280 towards Sandhill. And they were talking about these animals, gelada monkeys. They live in the Ethiopian highlands. They have huge manes, big fangs, weirdly, mostly grass and bugs. And the researchers said they had the largest vocabulary of any primate, except for humans. And I'm like, I've never even heard of these guys. In fact, the researchers swore that the animals talked about them behind their backs. And it was like, okay. But why are you guys then out there with a hand recorder, hand transcribing? Shouldn't we be using AI? And I started looking into it. If I didn't know about geladas, are there other animals? And it turns out parrots will lean over for the first week and a half of their chick's life and whisper a unique name into their ear until they can babble until they get it right. And they will use that unique name for the rest of their life. And the more I thought about it, the more I'm like, wow. Actually, if there's really a there for translating animal language, like what are the profound implications for animals speaking, having consciousness? Isn't this moment where like if the telescope as a new tool taught us that Earth was not the center, won't AI in this sense teach us that humanity is not the center? And you're exactly right, Reid. You were the first person outside of my core small friend group that I went to talk to. It was 2015, something around there, 2013.
Something like that, yeah.
And it was your vision of being like, that is an idea to go do, that gave me the confidence to go co-found with my co-founders, Katie Zakarian and so on, and got us to where we are now.
Yeah, no, I remember it's one of those things that sometimes happens in kind of all forms of pitching. When you were talking about this, I was like, oh, if we can even advance the ball a little bit, it will be epic, right? Because even some more glimmerings of understanding here, because we all know, when we think about it, that animals are smarter. They have than we reflexively think. They have language that we don't fully understand, but know that it happens. So let's dive a little bit into some of the, give a little bit of some of the kind of specifics of things that, kind of as you begin to learn. What are the things like the dolphins and orcas or other things as ways of doing it? And then say a little bit about, kind of what the hope for LLMs and generative AI tools are as well.
Yeah. Well, again, it's just like the more you look, the more you see. So off the coast of Norway every year, there's a group of dolphins that all speak one way and a group of false killer whales that all speak a different way. And they come together and they hunt. And when they do, they hunt in this super pod and they speak a third different thing. And you're like, well, actually, this is the perfect thing for generative language models to be able to translate to and from these essentially different dialects, different languages into their lingua franca, lingua vela.
Yes. Lingua
And
aquatis or something, whatever.
right, there we go.
Yes.
Good branding. So we are really starting to see lots of hints of decoding the more we look. And I'll just give like two examples of the way like large language models and generative AI are like helping us get there. The first is you're like, okay, how do you go about translating a language without any examples or Rosetta Stone? And it was 2017 that we started Earth Species Project. And it was because suddenly the field of AI learned how to translate between human languages without any examples. And it's this beautiful, brilliant thing where you can ask AI to build a shape that represents, well, anything, but let's say language. Imagine a galaxy, every star is a word, words that mean similar things are near each other, and then words that share a conceptual relationship, share a distance and direction. So king is to man as woman is to queen, so king is the same distance direction as woman is to queen. The core insight was, and for all the technical people out there, these things are called embeddings. The core insight is that you could build a shape that represents English, a shape that represents German, and just rotate one shape on top of the other to do translation. And even though there are words in one that don't exist in the other, the point which is dog ends up in the same spot in both. And that's sort of profound. But you're like, yeah, but English and German are related languages. But it turns out it works for every human language. Esperanto, Finnish, Urdu, Turkish, they all fit in a universal human meaning shape that AI has somehow deduced. It's found this universal, hidden underlying structure that unites all of us. And we're like, well, one, that's beautiful. And two, what happens if we build that for animal communication? Which parts overlap, which parts don't? So that's sort of like step A. Step B is, well, everyone's seen, you can now type in text and get out an image from AI. You type in text, you get out a video. That's Sora. This is multimodal translation. And the general rule is everything that can be translated will be translated. And we're starting to use this to translate from one modality to another. So the scientists we work with put little sensors on, say, whales that record video, audio, motion. And if you can translate what does one whale say to make another whale dive, well, whale strikes, or ship strikes are one of the leading causes of whale death. If you could learn how to say, please move down, but not in a way that makes them scared, but just says, hey, there's some food down there, you can really start getting towards some applications. And so it's that multimodality that says, even if we can't do this cool rotation thing, we know we're going to be able to get to some kind of translation.
Well, and part of course, you and I could geek out about this forever because I think it's the very important thing about understanding consciousness and sentience, even better understanding human beings and our position. And we do that on occasion.
Yes.
But, just because we have, kind of our masters of scale crew here, and they go, well, okay, this is super cool, but what does this mean for me? Right. And so, what do you think about how AI can help us become better communicators? What are some of the ways that not just in the kind of function of obviously understanding other languages, being able to speak, it's part of the, whole, like, I presume you saw I did this Reid versus Reid AI thing a couple weeks ago. And, what are the things that it can do to help everyone think about how do we listen better? How do we understand better? How do we communicate better? What are some of your thoughts there?
I love this question because I think it's undoubted that technology has made us all we speak a lot more, but I don't think it's made us, generally speaking, better listeners. And so then the question is, how do we use AI to help us listen better? And I'll give 3 different examples of increasingly large scale. The first one is there's a really beautiful measure that a nonprofit called More in Common does called perception gap. And it's trying to ask the question, when I am trying to model you and guess your beliefs, how is the gap between reality and my perception of you? So an example might be, if you ask Democrats, what percentage of Republicans think all Muslims are bad? Democrats will estimate it's like 85%, but if you actually ask Republicans, it's less than 15%. And so it's really interesting because we have perception gaps. When we are fighting with the other side, we're not really fighting with the other side. We're fighting with a misconception, a mirage of the other side. So what does AI have to do here? Well, it's hard to measure the truth of things, but it's easy to measure the truth of beliefs about beliefs. Like I can just measure, like, do you see the other side correctly? Now imagine Twitter or Facebook running AI that was just looking like what media is increasing the perception gap, what media is decreasing it, what media helps us see better together. And of course, the next thought is, well, the things that that prey on a false sense of the other side, the things that drive us most apart, those are the things that are clickbait, that are probably mis and disinformation, are the things that are amping up fears. So if we just used AI to amplify content that let us see each other accurately, a sort of massive nonviolent computational communication, like that would be a way of healing, I think, the wounds that help suture like our nations back together. And if I jump to just like one more here, because I think, well, we love nerding out.
Yes.
Most of the biggest problems in the world are collaboration, coordination problems, right? They're multipolar traps. That's the structure of inequality. That's the structure of climate change. What happens if we start to have AI agents interacting with each other? You start them with English and you evolve a new language for humans to speak that is especially good for coordination, collaboration, solving multipolar traps. Do you see where I'm sort of going with this? Is that we've never had a language that you evolved for a specific end that could help us do the hardest thing that humans need to do, which is coordinate better. So I think that might change the very nature of how game theory works. So I have more on this, but this is like, I think I want people to think like locally and then like really big, what can we do?
Yeah. It's both individually, but also system. And it's one of the ways that I love that you and Katie and, all the folks there at Species Project and a number of others, think about this. As a slightly different focus, in addition to your work at Earth Species Project, you're also the co-founder of the Center for Humane Technology, a nonprofit that advocates ethical uses and protections for our digital infrastructure. With the rapid acceleration of AI technology, there's been a lot of hand-wringing and doomer thinking in the general public, but given your work at ESP, you're clearly not anti-AI. So, how do we scale this technology thoughtfully without hampering innovation?
Yeah, also great question. To start with a metaphor, sometimes I think that AI is sort of like 24th century technology crashing down on the 21st century. And just imagine the 21st century tech crashing down on 16th century governance. And you have the king sitting around and he's like, all right, we have to deal with like telegram, radio, television, internet, social media, all at the same time. You're like,
podcasting.
I don't know, what are they going to do? There we go, right? Yes. The king's going to be like, I don't know, send out the knights. Like that form of governance wouldn't hold. And this isn't a form of hand-wringing. It's just like, I think an appraisal. And so I think one really simple thing we could do that I'd love everyone to start repeating is, well, if we as a US are going to spend $1 trillion in the next couple of years on AI capabilities, shouldn't we at least be spending 1% of that on upgrading governance itself? Like the US was founded on the idea that a group of people could come together, think really hard about how do you make a form of governance which is trustworthy, that is hard to capture, hard to corrupt. And that's lasted 250 years, but it was made with 17th century technology. We're now in the 21st century technology. Now is the refounding moment where we have zero knowledge proofs and AI and distributed trust systems. Like, let's go put 1% of everything we're putting into AI capabilities into upgrading how we want to govern it, because there is no one right answer. This is not like here's a policy. This is about how we navigate an increasingly complex situation.
Yep, I completely agree. Like technology redefines it, and so how do you navigate that?
Exactly. I'm really excited about that. The other big thing I would say here is that often we'll hear, I'm sure you hear this all the time, like, oh, but we can't slow down because we have to beat China. We have to beat our rivals. And I would just say that, well, you don't want to let your rivals define the nature of the race you're in. Like, we beat China to social media, which means we beat China to sort of a misinformed, polarized society with mental health issues. Instead, what we want to do is figure out how do we race to the most strengthened version of our democracies so our values win? And that's not a free-for-all. That's a different kind of thing. Okay, so you and I started talking about the possibility of decoding animals and animal communication for, like, as you said, a decade, and you saw the vision honestly really immediately. You've been our largest and most generous funder. Like, you're the reason why we get to even say that in the next 6 years we will make contact or have the technical capability of making contact with these 34 million-year-old cultures. What was it that you saw in ESP that really caught your attention way before AI was even a thing people were talking about?
Well, what we all hope in creating the future and use of technology is that you make the future a lot better than the now. And whether that's, obviously the medical stuff we were talking about earlier, whether it's, kind of like how we live our lives and what kinds of work we do and all the rest. And something that I think, is part of the vision that you've already kind of shared was actually, in fact, to be much, much better for kind of the world, inclusive of us very strongly, if we had a better understanding of whales and dolphins and crows and parrots and primates and all of these folks, because they are actually speaking. Can we hear them? Can we understand? Right? And that is what we aspire to as human beings. And part of the reason we say our, raison d'etre is bringing consciousness and compassion and helping ourselves evolve in that. And it was like, oh, this is a key step. And maybe we're there technologically. Let's take the shot. And then, of course, it's you and your crew and Katie, kind of smart and dedicated to doing it, because that's another part that goes into the entrepreneurial ethos. And so that was the reason why I was like it was yes on the spot.
Oh, it's really shifted. It's really transformed my life. And so, like, it's a deep thank you. I always think, like, we do not change when we speak. We change when we listen. And then one final question, when you spend 10,000 hours doing something, you become a master at it. You've spent many 10,000 hours, you're a master in many things. And from all of those, like, from that mastery, like, what's an opinion that you have for this coming world that your peers do not have?
Well, there's a number. So the question is, which one? Because this is a great question. This is a question that people should ask themselves. And it's not the version that, what do you think that no one else of the 8 billion people think? Because that's probably where you're crazy. It's relative to zones of expertise, a community, kind of a background and so forth. And maybe I'll just do one that's kind of in the technological thing that has, some, call it contrarian lack of popularity among some of the climate change people, but there's other climate change people who also think this, which is, I tend to think that of your scale solution to any world problem, it can be criminal justice, it can be economic justice and others, but also climate change, 30 to 80% of the solution is a technological solution. So you have to ask yourself what the technological strategy is. And in particular, when I look at climate change, I go, look, we need to be massively investing in the technology of it. It's one of the reasons I invest in fusion. It's one of the reasons I support some people doing some geoengineering. Oh, geoengineering, you're not solving the real problems. Like, we may need to buy 5 to 10 years for the clean energy to work. And if you need it, you want to be ready to do it without doing something catastrophic. And so, that technological focus, when it gets to most everything, but climate change inclusive, those are some of the things that at least some of my crew, looks a little skeptically at me for. So, anyway, so look, as you and I both know, we could go for hours because we could geek out on all this stuff. But hopefully other people were being entertained, because we were, for sure.
We were.
So now let's bring back Jodine.
Awesome.
You talking about geeking out? I think all of us, the chat has been on fire. Everyone has been geeking out on this conversation. Reid, Aza, amazing. Aza, don't go anywhere, because I do want to ask you a question. We got a few questions from the chat, but this one just really resonated with me. This person said, and I didn't get the name, so my apologies, but what animals collaborate the best? And I know you're still doing research on this, but just be curious, what animals collaborate best that we humans can actually emulate?
Such a great question. Sometimes I wonder whether if human beings had a social structure like ants, whether climate change would even be a problem to begin with, because they're a eusocial animal. Now, I'm not sure if I'd want to have like such specific castes and jobs, so don't hear me as saying that. But the great sociobiologist E.O. Wilson has, I think, one of, to me, the most prophetic and profound insights, and that is selfish individuals do outcompete altruistic individuals, but altruistic groups outcompete selfish groups, and everything else is commentary. That is to say, groups that cooperate better outcompete the ones that don't. And so it was actually Darwin who first asked this question: where do our noble traits come from? The things that like we rise up and towards. Well, those are things that require some kind of sacrifice for a greater thing, for a greater whole. Those all come from selection that's happening at the group level, not at the individual level. If you only select for the individual thing, like in your body, that's a kind of cancer when like a part of you grows. And so that's why I'm reaching towards like these eusocial animals, bees, ants, as an answer. I think the core question of morality, at least to me, is what is right relationship between the group and the individual. So the group works well together, but you're not trotting on the rights of the individual.
Reid, any words to add?
Well, as is always, part of the reason you can see that Aza and I geek out is I thought Aza's answer was extremely thoughtful. I mean, part of what Aza was gesturing at was if we could collaborate better as human beings, we could solve more macro problems. So like climate change or other kinds of things. And that's part of the eusocial part of that. I don't know if there's other animals that, and I'm not saying that skeptically, but this is one of the things we'll learn from their Theses project, that blend our individuality with collective, action. And so I don't know if there's something, there's probably fragments of things, like things about like maybe the dolphin orca whale hunting pattern, right, or, adopting certain languages or protocols, or maybe some of the things in that. But one of the things we deeply value, as Aza was gesturing at, is our individuality and freedom and choice. That, of course, also is what creates a certain amount of chaos and like, I'm all right, Jack. I don't care about the environment. Things that we need to navigate. So, anyway, that's just throwing up some additional Jackson Pollock paint on the canvas that Aza was painting on.
Well, thank you, Aza, for joining us tonight. Thank you, Reid. This fireside chat is being chalked up as one of my favorites at our strategy sessions. This was so good. And I can't wait, Aza, to learn more about what ESP is doing and the developments that come the following years. Excellent work. Excellent work as always, Reid. Thank you both so much.
Oh, thank you guys both so much.
Thanks, Jodine. Thanks, Aza.